But that will go part of your non-technical support as well, non-technical things. The fact that if you see someone doing inappropriate chest compressions, you are obliged to go and say something and stop them and say, look, yeah, and this mainly goes towards bystanders as well. That the fact that if they're just tickling them, just withdraw them, because we should be doing prayer.
Okay, guys, let me just say at this stage I've got the cameras running. I will edit any bits out.
We won't swear.
Please don't swear. Okay, right. We're going to talk about head injury patients. Well, it's not just head injury patients. We're going to talk. Well, the title of this session will be a bit sort of long-winded, but it's actually looking at patients who are or appear to be intoxicated, and it's not just head injury, it's also sort of acute illness and acute presentations. That would be a bit of a mouthful, so we're just going to call it head injury in intoxicated patients, but that's essentially what we're looking at, because this group of patients is certainly in the last couple of years has been a bit of an area where we have we've missed some things, and it's not bad practice or anything like that. It's just these are simple traps to fall into for all sorts of reasons, as I'm sure you're going to see. So what we're going to do throughout the day, we can have a look at throughout the next sort of half hour or so. We're going to have a look at the what actually happens. We're going to recap a bit of GCSE biology on the liver. We're going to have a look at some things about how liver disease actually works and affects the body, and some clues that it can give us about disease processes. We're going to have a look at clinical decision making. We'll just touch on that, and think about bias, which, as I'm sure you remember, is something we go on about every year on these days. We're just going to just briefly have a look at, talk about capacity, documentation, various other exciting bits and pieces like that. But what I'd really like to concentrate on is looking at our sort of physiology and pathophysiology of liver and liver illness, and those sorts of things. Alrighty. So first of all, we'll have a look at the just as I say, just some sort of basic facts about the liver. So it's in our kind of average 70 kg human person, it's about 1.5 kilos. It sits in the right upper quadrant, mostly protected by the rib cage, and a little bit does protrude into the left upper quadrant. It's sort of unusual in that it's got two blood supplies. You have your normal hepatic artery supplies oxygenated blood. Okay, that's fine. But what we need to bear in mind is there's also something called the portal circulation. Are you familiar with that? Or the first pass metabolism. What happens here, as it says there, this is where it's a supply of venous blood from the whole GI tract, so from sort of stomach, intestines, spleen, all of that. Everything drains via this. So I might have a slide actually. Yeah, you can see here. So there's the liver. There's our 1.5 kg, 4 lobes in our right upper quadrant, and here's your GI tract. So the stomach, and all the parts of the intestine there. Your ascending, transverse, descending colon, and you can see there's this network of veins that emanates from all of these organs of the GI tract, and takes all the blood, which is really rich in foreign protein, all the stuff we've just tipped down our neck, and it takes all that rich foreign protein via the blood up into the liver. Okay, we call that the portal circulation, and that metabolism is called first pass metabolism. It's the first pass of blood in the body, if you like. It goes straight from the guts as it's digested, as it's ingested and digested. The blood seeps off, goes straight up this portal circulation to the liver. Okay, hold that thought because it's important, because when we get problems in that portal circulation, as you'll see, when the liver starts packing up, the blood starts backing up, and that's where we get problems. All right, we'll come to that in a minute. So, as we say, so let's just go back to that. So we talked a bit about blood supply. So yeah, you've got your standard hepatic artery, arterial blood, supplies oxygenated blood that way. Then you've got the first pass. So functions, you've got four main things. You've got your metabolic function, so that is the first pass system. It's also the breakdown of bilirubin from red blood cells. Various, lots of sort of important things to do with glucose metabolism, sort of carbohydrate, all that sorts of things. Bilirubin is quite important. Storage function mostly is glucose and iron it stores. And these last two are important here. Synthesis and processing toxins. Synthesis is things which the liver makes. It makes glycogen, it makes albumin, okay, all very well. It also makes clotting factors, okay. So your clotting factor 7, fibrinogen, and prothrombin are all synthesised in the liver, okay. So what happens if our liver is diseased because we've been drinking too much for too long? What's going to happen to our carotene cascade, potentially?
Damaged.
Oh, damaged, absolutely right. Yeah, so just hang on to that thought. Anyone know what toxins the liver processes? There's three kind of main ones. Stella is the first one, or Prosecco, or whatever your drink of choice is. So alcohol, paracetamol, and various other noxious substances, one of which is ammonia. Okay, and just bear that in mind, because that comes into play in a moment as well. Right, so let's have so we've had a look at, that's our portal circulation. Just touch very briefly, this is the kind of microscopic arrangement of the liver. And the actual functional units, the bit that do the heavy lifting, are called hepatocytes, and that's these little pink areas here. These are all these, fantastically clever cells that do all those things I was just talking about, sort of synthesising all these clever chemicals and doing important stuff in the glucose metabolism and all the rest of it. You can see in the corner there, that's where it all goes on. Red one is your oxygenated blood from the hepatic artery. There's the portal vein, or there's a branch of the portal vein coming in, and there's millions of those from the gut taking all that foreign protein-rich blood into the liver. And as I say, along the side of each of those are our hepatocytes that do all the work. And then you can see, where's the sinusoids? The sinusoids, these little blue bits there, and they have like kind of protective function, like they sort of cell-eating kind of stuff goes on in the sinusoids. Don't worry too much about that. So what we do need to worry about is all the things that can go wrong in liver disease. So let's just have a think about our terms. I'm sure we'll talk about hepatitis and cirrhosis and things like that. Hepatitis just means what the name suggests. It is an inflammation of the functional units of the liver even, or the parenchyma of the liver. That's all it means. We can have hepatitis from other sources, as you know, like sort of Hep A, Hep B, C, D, all those ones, from either bloodborne or kind of waterborne pathogens, all those things. But obviously with alcoholic hepatitis, that's what we're kind of talking about today, the inflammation of the liver is because of too much of that. Okay. In terms of cirrhosis, this talks about the kind of the disease states that we go through in the liver, and there's kind of three. Really, you start off with, you have a fatty liver, and the liver becomes sort of engorged. At the same time, once that's gone on, the next kind of stage is fibrosis. So you get like a kind of scarring of the liver. As it becomes damaged and fatty, then you get scar tissue forming. Clearly, scar tissue doesn't work as well as nice healthy tissue, so we get some problems there. And then the end of the sort of the process is cirrhosis, and cirrhosis is when we get kind of meshes forming between that scar tissue. So if you just go back to these, the scars start off in these kind of between in the sinusoids, and you start to get this kind of network of scarring, and then as the liver tries to regenerate itself, you get a kind of mesh and a network as the cirrhosis develops. All those things can go on at the same time. They're not like stages 1, 2, 3. It's not like a linear thing. They can all potentially go on at the same time. Righty-ho. So, looking at the actual things that can go wrong, cerebral atrophy just means like a shrinking of the brain. This is something we've known about for many years. It is an undeniable fact of medical science that people who drink too much booze, their brains shrink. Okay, very much a similar sort of thing as you might be familiar with risk factor in older people, as the brain, as the ventricles of the brain shrink and pulls those little bridging veins tighter and tighter, just puts them at big risk of bleeds if they get any even quite a minor head injury. So I put under there query subdural hematoma. Okay, massive risk factor with this group of patients because they have the atrophy, the shrinkage of the ventricles of the brain. So those little bridging veins linking the dura mater, like the inner layer of the lining of the brain, and the grey matter itself gets pulled tight, so it doesn't take much to shear those veins, okay? And if they shear, then we get drip, 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 bleeding into a big space in the brain, so potentially we have a subdural, okay? Worryingly, how long do you think a chronic, what's our, any idea what our sort of definition for a chronic subdural hemorrhage is?
I've been to a bloke who'd been, I think he'd been slowly bleeding for 3 weeks.
That's exactly the answer I was looking for. Yeah. So even an acute one is up to 24 hours. Yeah. So what I want you to think is you could go to somebody a couple of days after they've had a knock on the head, they could be drip, drip, dripping a nice little subdural. Yeah. And they may not present because there's a kind of cavity or a kind of space potentially. You know, they can drip into that quite happily, and as we shall see, you know, they might just be presenting as a grumpy drunk, but they're actually a grumpy old person with a subdural. Okay, varicose hemorrhage, esophageal varices, are we all familiar with? Anyone not? You guys, have you all been to someone with ruptured esophagus? It's basically varicose veins in the esophagus, in the upper part of the GI tract. They're just, and it's a nasty event when, if those do rupture, all sorts of things can lead to that. You can get like just a bit of, bless you, a bit of acid reflux or whatever can cause those to rupture, and potentially can be catastrophic when they go. Equally, not always, so look for sort of subtler signs of shock as well. So it might be sort of melena, kind of subtle changes to OBS, that sort of thing. Alrighty, coagulopathy. We talked about clotting factors and that sort of thing. Again, it's just something we really need to be aware of, and that link to make is that our clotting factors are impaired because of the synthesis function is impaired. You know, that this liver, this once lovely, you know, it does all those fantastic things we talked about, and now it's had a lifetime of stellar or God knows what else, and it's now just like scabby old scar tissue, so it can't generate those things, can't synthesize those things like it should. Its ability, you know, we lose a lot of our clotting factors. Encephalopathy, encephalopathy just means, is a broad term meaning brain damage, basically. Neuropsychiatric disorder, if you want to give it a posh word. So just bear in mind, how might a person with alcohol-related brain damage present?
Drunk.
Thank you. Exactly that. Yeah? But they might not. They might be drunk as well, but they might not. Just briefly, how much alcohol, how many units of alcohol do you think per day do you need to put you at risk of this? And I hate to say it's not a lot.
That's it, I'm done for.
What's the daily average?
Any idea?
4, isn't it?
4. 4 will put you in the zone.
That's crazy, isn't it? Oh my days.
Uh-oh.
This is
Yeah.
My
But-
weekends off.
As my As my mate says, here for a good time, not a long time.
Oh, yeah, I know.
But having said that, it doesn't mean that everybody who consumes 4 units of alcohol is going to develop this. Okay, it does, and this is why the guidance is what it is. It suggests that we obviously shouldn't have. If you want to be safe, don't have that much to drink. Okay, and last of all is this one, Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. Yeah, Wernicke's, it's Wernicke encephalopathy and Korsakoff dementia. It's two things, it's two kind of separate syndromes that present as one. This one, has anyone ever had patients who had Wernicke's?
Yeah.
Oh, how do you know that confidently?
Because there's 2 in the Creasy nursing home on the road.
Ah, right.
Very young gentlemen as well.
Really?
That's why they've got dolls in place purely and simply because of that.
Crazy.
Yeah, it was. To be honest, it was the first time I'd ever come across it.
That's the interesting thing. So, okay, apart from you guys who have, anyone else ever think they've had a patient with Wernicke's? No? Anyone ever had a patient, possibly alcoholic, on thiamine tablets? Yeah? No, it was. It's pretty common, I would venture. Would you agree? You guys who look at drug histories, vitamin B1,
Yeah.
you're quite often seeing sort of patients on B1 patient tablets. Very likely that's what it is, because Wernicke's encephalopathy is reversible. It's a deficiency in vitamin B1. Vitamin B1 is does a lot of sort of important kind of neurotransmitter functions, and in the lack of it, you develop this nasty Wernicke's encephalopathy, brain damage, that build up our VIP B1 or our thiamine. Same thing, it's just a different word for it. We can fix that. Okay. Wernicke-Korsakoff presents as a classic triad of 3 things, of ataxic gait, or how could we put that in normal parlance? Staggering around, yeah.
They've got proper gait, haven't they?
Yeah. Sort of ataxic would be kind of lolling gait. Nystagmus, which is sort of kind of flicker of the eyes at the extremities, and confusion. So, grumpy guy staggering around. Does it sound like anybody we might present? Grumpy guy staggering around wearing 4 dirty coats down on the seafront here at Weymouth. You know, it might start to become a sort of. You might look at that sort of patient and think, oh, here we go. Do you know what I mean? Can you kind of see where I'm going with this? Right, so let's have a quick look at a case study. So if you just take one and just have a read of it.
Thank you.
I can have those back, please, if I could. So let's have a look. So it's a 43-year-old chap. The CAD details come up as this. Clearly intoxicated, bleeding from the head. Okay, so that's your handover. That's how the call is sold to you. On arrival, we've got a male patient, 45 years old, sat on a curb. He looks unkempt, he's a bit sweary, he's got a couple of friends with him, we've been with him all day. He was taken to A&E a couple of days ago, having fallen down 10 concrete steps. They didn't CT him and he was discharged after saying he wanted to go out. He's now unsteady, agrees to you assessing him, or he doesn't want to go in and he's a bit uncooperative. He's rather vague, tells you he is a recovering alcoholic and he takes thiamine, doesn't know why. So you check him out, all his signs are normal. Patient says he's not in pain, C-spine palpation is fine, no tenderness. He's bleeding from some scabs which look like they were sustained some time ago. He has a little graze with swelling and he's got some other marks on his head. He says, just effing take me home. He lodges in a single room with his landlord, who's also there, and he says he can look after him. Right, so a bit of a scattergun of facts there. Looking at that, what might your... So we've got a reasonable set of obs, no C-spine pain, reasonable sort of level of consciousness, doesn't want to go in. Any sort of concerns?
The history from 2 days earlier being taken in
Yeah,
because he fell down the steps.
definitely, yeah.
I'm amazed he wasn't CT.
I think he would fit Canada's C-spine rules Although actually being intoxicated,
He should have been CT'd. That's outrageous.
they do have like criteria for. I'm not sure he would actually.
Why? He's a vulnerable adult. That's the most important. You have to remember, people like that are really vulnerable. You have to be careful with them.
Okay. Well, that's a pretty good approach. Yeah, I can't fault that. But what's your sort of? Are you gonna what's his sort of main presenting complaint?
Well, he's drunk and he's bleeding from the head. So what's happened now?
He's unstable.
Okay. So what if that's true, then what's our de facto plan then? If he's drunk and bleeding from the head, what do we have to do? All right, can we employ clinical judgment, or are our hands tied effectively
You should be going in.
because of
Yeah. Alcohol.
because of who says that? Whose guideline? Not just SWAST, but whose guidelines?
Nice.
Nice, yeah, absolutely. Good. So I think on this study, potentially GCS less than 15, could be, couldn't it? Is he intoxicated? Do we know?
Yes, we suspect it.
We suspect it. We don't know it though, do we?
No.
Okay, continuing concern, possibly. Like you said, I think that's a good point you've raised. Continuing concern. Right. What about, now I know we've just spent sort of 10 minutes talking about different horrendous, horrible things that can be wrong with your liver. What, so it says there, so back to the case, what's our sort of decision-making approach? What's the sort of general safe approach to making clinical decisions?
Err on the side of caution.
Yeah, I'll definitely go with that.
He's got too many uncertainties. Too many unsure things to. You can't be blasé with someone like that.
Yeah.
You can't make assumptions.
Too many red flags, haven't you?
That's the word I was looking for, red flag. This is us being certain he hasn't got anything wrong with him, and this is us being dead cert that he has, being 100% sure, okay? So all we're ever going to have is an estimation of the probability that he's got something like that going on, okay? So we'll come in, we'll come up with a load of ideas, we'll get some we'll form some hypotheses of what's going on, so some theoretical ideas of what it realistically could be. What I would suggest, and I'll just skirt over this a little fairly briefly, but what I would suggest is you think, what are my red flags? Do any of my, because when we look at this chat, we're going to instantly start thinking of a range of potential things that could be wrong with him, and we want to tick them off, yeah, that we can be confident that he doesn't have any of those. Okay, at the point where we cannot exclude a red flag, we have to go in, or we have to advise him to go in, all right? There was that box last year, hypothetical deduction analysis. Does everyone see that on their LDR form? Which I think we all looked at like, I'll just tick that bit. That's actually what it is. It is deducing, it's working back from a range of theories or hypotheses. You know, we talk about our hypothetical friend, don't we? So it's just like a hypothesis is something reasonable that it could be. It's like an idea of what something might be. Does that make sense? So what we want to do is work back through those, and we want to exclude these. Is it okay to say it is plausible that somebody doesn't have something wrong with them?
Yes, it is okay.
Well, it's okay. Everything's okay. Is it advisable to say, well, it's plausible that it could be that, so I'm going to go with it?
No.
No, it's not. I would say not. So what kind of biases are going to come into play here?
The type of person that, well, how he's presenting in his appearance, his
Yeah.
unkempt appearance, he's
Yeah.
swearing, he's that bias.
Are we going to like this person?
Not if you're
No.
swearing at you.
No, that's unlikely. How about so, you know, and what about that sort of tendency that maybe we look at people and you might think, you know, well, it's a self-inflicted injury. It's not. It wasn't an act of God that he got an illness. He brought it upon himself by drinking 4 units a day or something.
That's where your empathy comes in, because he's still a human being, and then at the end of the day, he drinks for a reason.
Or he might just drink because he likes it. Who are we to say? But the point is in terms of having biases, which can stop us thinking clearly and objectively, when we start kind of thinking, it's called negative attribution, when we start sort of thinking that a patient's disease is their own fault, then we can start losing that our kind of objectivity. How about we look at, so let's go back to our initial diagnosis, and I know I've asked you to sort of make a decision quite early, but that idea that we sort of get something, we tick a few boxes, we think, yeah, that's plausible, and then we sort of draw our line in the sand and think, right, I think it's this, that, and the other because of A, B, C. And that's where we start kind of thinking, well, this is what confirmation bias is, or anchoring bias, when you latch onto something and you think, right, that's it, I'm happy with that, I reckon I'm right, I'm going to go with that. And actually, if any other evidence comes to light, because you're kind of happy with that, you've made up your mind, you've made a decision, you stick that to one side and sort of ignore it. That's what confirmation bias is. This is what I mentioned about things being plausible. It's always plausible, always reasonable it could be something, but until we can be hand on heart pretty sure that that's the case, we need to have this, whatever that is, right on our radar for being something to worry about. Okay? And patients we don't like. Yeah. Tempting to jog them on as quick as possible, is it not?
No.
I would say, is it tempting?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course it is.
Not even
Yeah.
tempting anymore. I value my job too much.
Good. Yeah, that's the correct answer. The guidance from people much cleverer than me is spend twice as long with the patient you don't like. You know, because that's the one that's going to get you in trouble.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a valid point there,
Cool.
We don't even know if he is drunk. He might not have even had a drink.
That's right.
It's interesting, he's got 2 friends with him,
Yeah.
so it's worth
Well, we
asking.
haven't really drawn much attention to that, have we? But yeah, that's very true, and that is a key question. Yeah.
I mean, they might have spent the afternoon in the pub, but equally they might have said, no, he's a recovering alcoholic, he hasn't had anything to drink. Either way, he's vulnerable.
Okay, I know we bang, absolutely, yeah. I mean, we bang on and on about capacity every year, so it's my pet subject, or it seems to have become my pet subject whenever there's a course to talk. They're like, can you do capacity? So, I don't want to go on about it too much. Is this chap going to have capacity? That's the question, isn't it?
Potentially?
Why'd you say
No.
that? Potentially not.
Assumed,
Try another answer. Maybe.
assumed until proven otherwise.
Yeah, that is one principle, it's assumed until proven otherwise. Does he have a substantial disturbance? Question 1, does he have a substantial disturbance in the functioning of his mind?
yeah.
Possibly, yes.
Yeah.
If he's drunk, he might do. If he's got encephalopathy, he might do. So, quite possibly, yeah. Is it affecting his decision at the material time? Is it affecting his ability to make the decision? That's stage 2. So, has he got a disturbance? Probably. Is it affecting his ability to decide, make a decision? Yeah, I'd say
Yeah.
probably is. So, what we've got to do? Has he got capacity?
No.
Probably not at this stage. So what's our 5 principles? What do we have to do? First off, we have to communicate, inform risks and benefits, all that sort of thing. Take every step we can to try and get him to understand. We have to communicate and make it any question of consent informed consent. Yeah. Have to see if he can understand those risks and benefits to any treatment or of not having treatment, understand the nature of the decision, all those things. So communicate, understand, see if he can retain the information, which I doubt he will. Can he evaluate it? No. If after all this, and this is all on your EPCR, he still hasn't got capacity, we can take an interest in his best interest as long as it's least restrictive. Okay, does that make sense? So if it's in his best interest to go to hospital and it's not too restrictive, we can take him off there. If it was his best interest to see a doctor, we could get a doctor to come and see him if that was less restrictive. It gets a bit murky. What about if we think he's, you know, got hours to live and he's not going to come with us?
It depends if he's got capacity or not.
Well, I think we're suggesting he probably doesn't, actually. I doubt very much anyone would look at this chap, whether he's intoxicated or got encephalopathy.
He's got hours to live. Depends how
Please.
physically able he is.
Police don't want to know. Sorry. Sorry.
His friends on the other place, and I would batter on into the police car.
Duty officer.
Oh God, that could work both ways.
Just to say that if it is a sort of life-threatening, you know, an event of that seriousness, we are going to have to act in his best interest. Okay? You might be able to say, well, you know, if we're not, you know, we might be worried that he's got subdural, absolutely. So we need to kind of protect that. So we need to protect him. So we could just get some good safety netting, and a GP, a SPUEC or whatever, all those things, and just try and get some robust safety netting in place. But if we have genuine belief that we think he's going to die, then we're probably going to have to take him in one way and another. That's where it gets a bit more murky, because we're getting into the realms of restraint and stuff like that. But that's next year.
I would
So-
insist on the police. I
Yeah,
wouldn't let them say no to that. I would
Yeah.
really, I have done that before, once really kicked up a fuss until I got them. Because if you really need them, we're not able to restrain somebody who is agitated. That's not fair.
No, and who's who's sort of vulnerable as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a real hard one.
I'm stronger than me.
I think that's the key point. Is it's a really difficult decision, even if you're quite confident applying the principles of the law, and it is all on the EPCR. Okay, but just to go on from there. Okay, so there's our things. Okay, so just to say that, as I mentioned, it's all on the EPCR. We do please really need you to fill in the right boxes on this. You could forgive me if I'm preaching to the converted or that you do this anyway, but there are these drop-down boxes.
Can you go back one for me?
Not on
That
every,
one?
not on every patient, surely.
What's that?
The capacity assessment.
You don't have to do a capacity assessment. You have to tick the capacity box.
On everyone.
Yeah.
I've never ticked. They've got capacity unless I only do an assessment if I'm
Well, then
concerned.
you can just tick that then, can't you? That's 3 clicks.
Just I should tick
Tick,
it
tick, tick.
anyway.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
I mean, the trust would like you to get them to sign that box as well, which is pretty belt and braces in terms of capacity. Sorry?
It's a pretty good description, to be fair.
What's that?
Well, you know, remember they used to have the little form.
Yeah.
It was a nightmare to wholeheartedly understand it. So the one on the EPCR really does quite clearly.
Yeah, it does. It doesn't give you a lot of depth though, does it? That's the trouble. So, just going back there, if you have, you might want to have a closer look at that room. So
I see it all the time and I think, oh, I won't bother with that, they've got capacity.
please do bother with that. especially if you've got somebody who is a complex case, like our chap here.
Yes.
Yeah, and you would just tick all your boxes, and then there's space for extra information where you could put discussed, you know, all potential risks of avoiding treatment, advised.
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z will happen to you if you don't go to hospital. We've got to put it all down, because this is the stuff, and this is where people fall down, is because they'll just put like in the free text bit, patient had capacity, and I hate to say it, but this gets ripped to shreds when these things go to.
It would do, wouldn't
Yeah,
it? Yeah,
exactly. You've got a box where you
Yeah.
can tick all the boxes to say that you've applied the test like by the law, because we don't really expect you to, you're not like lawyers out there. You've just got to work, and the tool is there to help you get through it. Yeah. So use it, but please add the free text as well to add that sort of detail. If you've got a refusal, you give a box for that as well. Please use that if they're refusing against your advice. Yeah? And I'm sure you're all full aware there is a safety netting box as well. I'm seeing 3 nodding heads.
Yeah.
Yeah? You're happy with that?
I feel that in.
Hannah, you've probably yet to see this, really, haven't you?
Yeah, I need to have a look at one properly.
Yeah, you will get used to it. Sorry, apologies for the rather murky photos there. So what sort of thing? So let's find. So we go on. It's under the discharge tab. Go safety netting. Who to call? Just explicitly say what advice we give in what circumstances. So if we're worried that someone's got subdural or is at risk of a bleed, we tell them what to do and can they access a phone and what time frame to use. Sorry, I just realised, just quite important, I was banging on about portal hypertension and we said varices. Sorry, I should have made, there's a really important link between those two, okay, and the fact that we've got that build-up of, sorry, I should have discussed that a little bit more at the time, it's important, so I'll just revisit it now. If we have that hypertension, the portal hypertension, that's what kind of, that build-up of back pressure in all those veins, that's why we get such a nasty bleed with the varices. But there's other complications of the hypertension as well, all sorts of things. Anyway, so there's also, back to the EPCR, there's also an alcohol and drug tabs. Again, please use it, rather than just stick some random stuff down in the free text even, please use the right tab, yeah? Again, it's just things like this, by having that belt and braces documentation, which if, God forbid, you do end up having to explain yourselves, then you're better equipped to do so. So, yeah, now, I did write these slides, but I didn't write that bit, but it's true. That would have been my editor, my L&D manager. Yeah, it's an absolute nest of snakes, yeah. For those reasons, it might not be that patient is intoxicated. Our case study is taken from a genuine case. That patient was sober as a judge. They had not had a sober life, it is true, but at that time they were sober. And this is why we always consider the physiological context of alcoholic liver disease. Okay, we'll put it in plain language. Just think how knackered, how important that liver is. We cannot live a happy life without a good liver. And if you've got alcoholic liver disease, all those critical functions are not working. Bias is incredibly tempting in this group of patients. Please bear that in mind. They're the ones who will, no one wants to come into work and get something wrong and end up, being questions asked about their treatment. Thinking of, we all have biases. Cut me and I bleed. We all have them. So please just recognise them. Red flags. So aspiration, obviously, GI bleed and cerebral hemorrhage are big ones with this group of patients. What's the best safety netting we can achieve? What's the best worsening advice we can do? Document. All right? That's that. So please tread carefully.
What it's missed out is the power of gentle persuasion.
Well, I wouldn't say that's missed out, because that goes without saying.
Yeah, but that is actually, it doesn't work every time, but he's got 2 friends with him. You explain nicely, keep the situation calm. Generally, not always, but generally it does work in your favour. Yeah, and absolutely, by just sort of gentle persuasion, or using friends for a bit of power of the nag. What about if
whatever it might be. Yeah, all those. You just use whatever you can, don't you? But those are the skills. We can't teach you those skills. Hopefully you've got those already and use them.
Honed to perfection over the
yes,
years.
I'm sure. Good. All right. So anyway, that's intoxicated. So sudden illness and injury in intoxicated and alcohol-dependent patients is the proper name of that session. Bit of a mouthful, but there you are. So yeah, tread carefully. Right. So whilst we're talking about that, we're also going to have a look at. Oh, here we go. Thank you, Ian. Right. Thank you for behaving for the tape. All I've got to do is download it now.